This hearing will come to order. The Readiness Subcommittee today meets to receive testimony on the posture of the United States Transportation Command, U.S. Transcom. And I want to thank our witness this afternoon, General Reed, for being here today. Sir, it's good meeting with you earlier in the week. I want to say up front, Transcom is a very, very important combatant command. It's not the one that you always hear about, but it's really critical to our military, our readiness, and our ability to win wars, and our ability to project power and sustain our forces. As a senator from Alaska, I'm keenly aware of the unique challenges and strategic opportunities our state presents in the broader national security landscape, but we are also operating in an area where logistics and sustainment are no longer a given in any potential conflict. What used to be an asterisk or an incorrect assumption, or what they call in the military fairy dusting away a problem on DoD's part with regard to sustained and contested logistics, has allowed our adversaries, such as China and Russia, to actively develop capabilities aimed at disrupting our mobility and sustainment operations across multiple domains. Current theaters from the Indo-Pacific region to the Arctic to the European theater in the Middle East all present significant, unique challenges in military contested logistics. Our military must ensure that pre-positioned stockpiles, robust transportation networks, and hardened infrastructure are available to sustain forces in high-end conflicts. I'm particularly interested in how Transcom is addressing contested logistics through enhanced resiliency in sea lift, airlift, and overland transportation. I would also like to hear your thoughts, General, on how we can better leverage infrastructure, our ports and airfields to strengthen our power projection capabilities in both the Arctic and the Indo-Pacific regions. As the Air Force looks to the KC-46 and other next-generation programs for its air refueling needs, we cannot forget about the programs that are actually doing today's missions. The KC-135 has been a cornerstone of the U.S. Air Force's air mobility and refueling capabilities since the 1950s. That's not an incorrect statement, since the 1950s. But it needs advances in technology to evolve with military needs. While this is not a budget hearing today, I hope, General Reed, to hear about how Transcom has informed the Air Force's tanker strategy moving forward, especially in light of the long delays in KC-46 deliveries and recent reports about cracks in certain components of the aircraft. Air refueling tankers play a vital role in extending the range and endurance of fighter aircraft, bombers, surveillance planes, enabling them to perform long-range missions without relying on forward operating bases. They are crucial to America's Fight Tonight mandate, and as we talked about earlier, General, this morning, they're actually very crucial in my home state of Alaska, where Russian and Chinese incursions into our aid over the last year have spiked. The men and women who fly these intercept missions from Alaska do nearly 2,000-mile round trips to intercept Russian and Chinese strategic bombers, and they, of course, rely heavily on Transcom tankers to get them to the intercept and to get them home safely. We also want to hear about the challenges with regard to shipbuilding and military sea lift command, which is another element of what Transcom does and does so well. Modernization of our sea lift capacity must be a top priority if we are to maintain our ability to surge forces anywhere in the world in a crisis. The recently initiated tanker security program is a natural progression, but broader efforts are needed to ensure that we do not face a mobility crisis in the coming decade. I'm particularly interested in hearing about the status of sea lift recapitalization efforts, including any challenges Transcom is encountering, so that when the FY26 President budget is released, we can follow up to see if funding support is needed to accelerate modernization efforts. The well-being of our troops and their families is obviously a top priority of this committee. We must ensure that the different changes that we've seen in the global household contract goods challenges are made in a way that provides seamless transitions during permanent change of station moves. General Reed, I look forward to getting an update on this program in light of the challenges. Finally, I want to thank the men and women of U.S. Transcom for the critical work they do every day to sustain our military forces and project power globally. Again, this is an incredible combatant command that not enough Americans know about, understand, and appreciate. And this hearing is in part to help change that. With that, I want to recognize Ranking Member Senator Hirono for her opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and General Reed, it's good to see you. Thank you very much for your service. Senator Sullivan, it's good to continue our work on this subcommittee, this time you as chair and me as ranking, so we will continue our efforts together. General Reed, thank you for your service to our nation, and I thank the service members under your command around the globe conducting missions even as we speak. Transcom plays a critical role in the movement of people, supplies, and equipment anywhere in the world. Your command remains the backbone of our military to ensure the joint force remains agile and responsive. However, as the landscape for logistics continues to evolve, we must adapt to the new reality and full spectrum of emerging threats, ranging from cyber attacks to kinetic strikes on ports and airfields, and we need to recognize that contested logistics will be a battlefield in itself. Fortunately, the Air Force is currently taking steps to modernize its aerial refueling fleet, shifting toward a new tanker design that can operate in contested environments. The blended wing body, BWB aircraft, is a promising solution offering 90% more range, upwards of 50% more fuel efficiency, 80% more fuel offboard capability for sortie generations, takes up to 40% less space on airfields, flies 2,000 feet higher, and requires less landing and a takeoff distance. All I can say is wow and very impressive. We have to make it happen. Beyond these critical benefits, the blended wing body design would save at least $900 million per year on fuel. $900 million. In the short term, 3D printed micro vanes on transport aircraft reduce drag, pay for itself in just 7 months, and yield a few percentages on fuel as well. While that may not sound like much at first glance, the DoD spends over $10 billion each year on operational energy costs. To be clear, investing in operational energy programs is not just about cost savings, it directly enhances our lethality, readiness, and ability to sustain operations in the Indo-Pacific and beyond. Unfortunately, the Transcom assets have been recently used in a very inefficient manner and at great cost to the Department of Defense, all for, in my view, political show. The use of C-17s and C-130s to transport some 5,000 migrants at 3 times the cost of DHS chartered flights, and the DoD electing to do so on a non-reimbursable basis is not only inefficient, but also detracts from our core military mission. Just last year, the Department of Homeland Security removed over 685,000 individuals without DoD assistance, the largest amount of people since 2011. Obviously, during the Biden years that the DHS managed to do this. Yet the DoD has opted to fly at least 3 times to India, each trip costing taxpayers over $2.5 million, and at least one of which tasked a refueling tanker to fly from New Jersey to Honolulu, only to return the next day. Beyond the questionable legal basis under which this is occurring, I want to know who is making the decision to fly in such an inefficient and costly manner. There was a time when my Republican counterparts would object to DoD writing a blank check to do the job of another government agency. Transcom must remain focused on strategic mobility and not burdened with missions that are outside its intended purpose. Transcom would be far better off returning to its rightful focus on contested logistics. Because energy security remains a critical challenge, our forces in the Indo-Pacific, for example, at Kwajalein Atoll, rely on vulnerable fuel shipments. In the event of conflict, these fuel supply lines would be prime targets for our adversaries. A more resilient energy strategy incorporating distributed energy assets and more efficient technologies is essential for maintaining operational effectiveness. Transcom is a key pillar of our national security, but we must ensure that it remains focused on its core mission. Whether by modernizing our tanker fleet or strengthening contested logistic capabilities, we must make the right investments and policy decisions. So, General Reed, again, I thank you for your leadership. Look forward to your testimony.
And thank you, Senator Hirono. I see that we have the ranking member of the entire committee, the former chairman of the Armed Services Committee, here with us, my good friend, Senator Jack Reed. Senator Reed, would you wish to say a few opening comments?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your hospitality, but I would just wait for my questions.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. General Reed, the floor is yours, and a longer written statement we can make sure gets submitted for the record.
Chairman Sullivan, Ranking Member Hirono, distinguished members of this subcommittee, good afternoon. I am honored to join you today with my lovely bride, Lynn, and Senior Enlisted Leader, Chief Master Sergeant Brian Krzelnik, to represent the men and women of the United States Transportation Command. A warfighting command, we project, maneuver, and sustain the joint force anytime, anywhere, in support of our national objectives. Our warfighting elements consist of 3 service component commands: Military Surface Deployment and Distribution Command, Military Sealift Command, Air Mobility Command, and our direct subordinate, the Joint Enabling Capabilities Command. Beyond our core military units, U.S. Transcom maintains strong partnerships with the commercial transportation industry, our 4th component, to fully execute our unified command plan tasks. Today's security environment presents numerous complex challenges to force projection and logistics as adversaries actively seek to disrupt, degrade, and deny our transportation networks, especially within the homeland. With 85% of U.S. combat power residing within the continental United States, resilient transportation networks fortified against malicious cyber attacks now prioritize the crucial fort-to-port transportation segment. Even after overcoming initial deployment disruptions, we must continuously enhance our material capabilities to maintain a decisive advantage. Decisive advantage demands a modernized and connected sealift, airlift, and air refueling fleet. By 2032, 54% of our government-owned sealift ships will reach the end of their service life. To support our maritime industrial base and protect a healthy pool of qualified crews to crew the vessels, we need fully funded maritime security program, tanker security program, the Jones Act, and adherence to cargo preference laws. The start of a recapitalization plan is due for our airlift fleet because of the long lead time for platform development. We welcome the service-led recapitalization plans of the air refueling fleet, which must continue uninterrupted into the future. Even after the Air Force accepts the final contracted KC-46, the average age of the remaining KC-135 fleet will be 67 years old. Finally, we remain committed to the ongoing transformation of the global household goods program. Moving is an integral part of our life, and while most of us relocate every 2 to 3 years and learn better ways of doing it every time we move, it is always challenging. The department began transitioning to the Global Household Goods Contract, or GHC, in April 2024 with the goal of providing an improved moving experience for service members and their families. This transformation is a monumental task and reaches into every aspect of a service member's relocation. And because GHC is reshaping how we move service members, their families, and their memories, we remain in close collaboration with the services to identify and then take action to resolve issues. Because we are centered on service members and families, just this past week, we made an adjustment to the transfer rate to the prime contractor, and while it has not been an easy path, there have been issues. There should be no doubt we will see this through. These challenges may sound daunting. However, U.S. Transcom has the global transportation awareness and authorities to address them. And I will be clear that I have no doubt that our professionals will overcome any disruption. We are emboldened by our guiding principles to be ready, united, and decisive. U.S. Transcom was created as a purpose-built force to provide the essential surface, ocean, and airlift capacity to project and sustain American military power anywhere in the world at any time. Thank you for your continued and unwavering support for our mission and our people. I welcome your questions, and together we deliver.
Thank you, General, and thank you again to you and the men and women of U.S. Transcom for the exceptional work that they do. I'm going to yield my first round of questioning to my colleague, Senator Fisher, and then we'll go in the regular order here. Senator Hirono will be next.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan, and thank you for your courtesy in letting me go ahead. Welcome, General Reed. During your confirmation hearing, you described how you intended to sharpen Transcom's contribution to the Lethal Joint Force. This includes a ready tanker fleet that is able to support both contingencies around the world and STRATCOM and also NORTHCOM missions that we have here in the homeland. As the B-21 bomber enters service, which will modernize and increase our bomber fleet, we must also ensure that we have an adequate tanker fleet to support this platform and the important missions it will perform. I understand that the Air Force will make the ultimate decision on its tanker acquisition strategy, but I'd like to better understand how Transcom is working with the Air Force to communicate its requirements. Are you expressing your needs to the Air Force on what you need to support a nuclear bomber force so that it remains effective and a credible deterrent globally?
Yes, Senator. Just within the last month, my staff and I took a trip to U.S. STRATCOM, and we sat down with the commander there and his staff to hold warfighter talks. During that time, we described what it is that he's called to do so that we can more efficiently and effectively understand how we need to be there with him. During that same time, we got a really deep understanding in terms of how they plan to employ their new aircraft, and that will drive a slightly different way in which we are to support them, which actually means that it's going to be a little bit higher requirement, specifically in the field transfer. As a result, he and I are both working together to go to the service to explain to them what's required and what's expected in order for us to work together to get that done.
If there's anything we can do on this committee to help you with that endeavor, please let me know.
Yes, Senator, thank you.
Thank you. General Reed, it is clear that in a great power conflict, the U.S. would be unlikely to achieve the level of air or sea superiority that it achieved in recent wars.
This means that ships and aircraft that will be part of any sea lift or airlift effort must be prepared to operate in a contested environment, with the assumption that they will be targeted in various ways to prevent material from reaching its destination. I appreciated our discussion on this topic during your confirmation hearing and at our meeting we had in the SCIF last week. Since you've taken command, what steps have you taken to better prepare TRANSCOM to perform strategic lift in a contested environment?
Senator, one of the things that I've done is I've made travels around the world to talk to my peers. I've looked at the world as they see it. I've looked at the threats as they see it. And I've also made sure that our staffs are working closer together in the planning aspect, which is actually carrying over into how we exercise together. So with that being said, we have a much better understanding of what the adversaries are likely to do, how they would fight, what they are most likely to do. And with that being said, we adapt that to the plans, evaluate how that would change the force, look to see what kind of options we have left, and then what we can decide to do from that point on. So it's a very robust way ahead, ma'am.
You know, as you know, our sea lift assets are important to ensuring that our forces and material arrive on time, in enough time to rapidly execute their mission. Unfortunately, over the years, an integral part of our sea lift fleet, the Ready Reserve Force, has suffered from a reduction in capacity and readiness as a result of the aging vessels and the underinvestment. Given this situation, can you provide an update on the recapitalization of the Ready Reserve Fleet and how you're working with MARAD to increase capability and capacity in that regard?
Together, we're working to get ships in any way that we absolutely can. The address last night by the Commander-in-Chief stated that sea lift is absolutely something that we need to do. He intends to make sure that we can return to the seas. So we need to both build it here, and we actually need to buy used.
Could you repeat your last sentence, please?
Yes, ma'am. We need to build new, and we need to buy used.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Reed, a next-generation tanker, and I mentioned this in my opening statement, in the form of a blended wing body aircraft would save between 30 to 50% in fuel, which would be invaluable to operations in the Indo-Pacific in terms of extended range, sortie generation, and reducing contested logistics vulnerabilities. As a pilot who has flown more than 3,500 hours in various types of transport aircraft, how important is it for the Air Force to continue investing in the blended wing body and other operational energy programs? And do you think they have benefits that increase lethality and readiness?
Senator, we are actively advocating for any and all technology that can make sure that we can use the least amount of fuel possible, that our aircraft can go as long as possible, and they can stay aloft as long as they can. As we have been looking at what's possible in order to operate, some of the criteria that we also look at is, as you mentioned in your statement, is how long or how short of a runway can we operate on, and balance that with how much fuel we can carry and then how far we can go. When it comes to force projection and sustainment of the force, the more fuel efficient an aircraft is, then the more effective we'll be, and also the more options we will have.
So of all of these, you're open to other developments that would save you fuel, et cetera, but would the blended wing body development be one of those important modernizations that you would, you hope will come about?
Ma'am, it's a very promising technology, and if it's something we can get and something we can use, I will absolutely take it. The other thing that we consider is that at some point, the commercial world will most likely catch up with this, and when they're able to produce it, we will already have done the work to make sure that we can use it as well.
I mentioned in my opening the consternation with the use of your assets to transport, frankly, just a very few migrants at a cost, in the instance that I mentioned, at a cost of $2.5 million to move only about 100 migrants to India. Contrasts with the prior administration, it was 685,000 people were removed through Homeland Security's own programs. And so, I wanted to know, because this is very out of proportion, in my view, to what should be undertaking by Transcom. So who makes the decision to fly in this inefficient manner using your assets?
The Department of Homeland Security is the lead agency for this. In that, the Department of Defense is supporting them. The lead combatant command within our department is NORTHCOM, and we work with them to receive the task to actually fly sorties.
So you're saying that you did not make this decision to use your assets to fly 100 people to India?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Are you going to be tasked to do more of this kind of transport?
Ma'am, if I get the task, I'll absolutely fly it.
Or do you have some sort of an understanding already of what the expectations are? And these are all non-reimbursable to you events.
Ma'am, in a few conversations that I've had, I am to expect maybe more flights. I will tell you that within the last 48 hours, we have not flown any.
I think that it is really important for me, at least, as the ranking person on this committee, that we express our concern to you, that this would not be the kind of use of your assets that we should contemplate. And since you are not the person to make that decision, that there are no guarantees that this use of your assets will not continue. And so if you are given this decision to transport more people, I would like this committee to be informed of that. And as of now, you have no, that's what you're telling me, no idea whether you will be tasked to conduct this kind of mission in a way that I think is not part of your mission. So will you let this committee know if you begin to use your assets for these kinds of transport?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. So you did mention that you have an aging fleet, and there is the possibility of your purchasing used ships from other countries, and I think we put a limit on what you can do there. For the long term, yes, obviously, I think we need to create a capability for shipbuilding because you have an aging fleet. But for the short term, what would be helpful to you?
In the short term, we would need maximum flexibility to buy used foreign ships on the commercial market, obtain those ships, refurb them here in the States, and then put those ships to sea.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, we put a limit on the number of these kinds of ships. So I'm asking whether in the short term, how many more ships would you like to be authorized to buy from foreign sources?
Yes, I would. I am asking for the limit to be raised beyond 10 to allow us to actually shop the market. Currently, there are 10 ships available for us to pursue.
Are you asking for authorization to buy 10 more?
I'm asking authorization to buy 10 more.
Well, good luck with that. No, that was, forget I said that. I mean, we want you to be able to do your job. Just one more thing. You mentioned the Jones Act. There are people who sometimes do not understand the importance of the Jones Act. Can you very briefly tell us why the Jones Act is important to Transcom and to national security?
The Jones Act allows us to actually have shipping resources here and a fleet. And so because of that act, we actually have a way to make sure that we can build ships here in the United States, that we can sail those ships to maintain commerce, that we can actually produce the crews that actually sail those ships so that we have a core of folks that can actually operate. At the same time, if the nation needs folks to go to sea, we can call on that force to actually sail, and they're our citizens, and then we will be more secure in that way.
Yeah, one aspect of the Jones Act very important is that you can work with the commercial shippers, private sector ships. Isn't that correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence.
Thank you, Senator Hirono. General, I'm going to ask my round of questions now. Let me just follow up on a couple of questions Senator Hirono asked. For the going above the 10-ship cap, does that require, is there waiver authority that we can grant that can be granted by someone in DOD, or does that require a change in legislation?
Chairman, that's a change in NDAA. And so if we can get that change, ideally, what we would need to recap the fleet are 4 ships a year. And if they're available on the market, we would pursue that. At a minimum, we would need 2 a year.
Okay. And let me ask, on 2 years ago, your predecessor told us that by 2023, 37 of the 50 government-owned surge sea lift ships will approach the end of their service life. Military Sea Lift Command and the Navy announced in November that it would sideline 17 ships from the MSC to ease the stress of civilian mariners. These ships obviously play a very important role, like oilers, hospital ships, cable layers. Can you walk us through the current TRANSCOM plan, General, for increasing and manning maintenance programs for the MSC vessels so they are not left sidelined in the long term?
Chairman, on the Navy side, the MSC commander with his Navy hat made that decision mainly for the welfare of the crews. And so the problem is that—
And those are civilian mariner crews?
That's correct. And so the challenge there is that with the number of ships and the shortfall of the crews, it was very hard to manage the crews in a way that was sustainable, and so he did that. Separate from that, for under the Department of Transportation and the Maritime Administration, what we're seeking to do there is for the civilian crews that we have there, these are merchant mariners in the commercial fleet that when called, come to sail with us and support our needs. What we would like to do for them is to build new ships if we can, and to buy younger used ships so that they have much better equipment. In that same way, when they have the better equipment, then they're more likely to stay with us.
Yeah.
And that is our way to make sure that we can sustain that force.
Okay, thank you. We've recently seen a number of incidents in the Taiwan Strait and the Baltic Sea whereby undersea cables were damaged or destroyed by ships with connections to Russia and China. Can you talk specifically about the current condition of our cable layers and whether or not you think we are ready to respond to the types of attacks we may see in any kind of conflict, or heck, the Russians and Chinese are doing it in non-conflict situations that relate to our undersea cables? By the way, I know you know this, General, nearly 95% of the world's internet traffic goes through these cables.
Chairman, those are specialty ships that we have. We don't have very many of them. They are old. The ships that crew them, those ships are very capable. Those are also ships that we actually need to make sure that they're younger, that they're faster, and that they're more reliable as well.
Do we have any ships online that you see coming into the fleet that are those kind of ships you just described?
Chairman, I do not.
Let me ask about another challenge that you highlighted and Senator Fisher already mentioned. Can you walk me through the kind of broader readiness concerns that you have with the KC-135 and KC-46 tankers? I know this is a top priority, so how you integrate them, how you use one set, which is, as you mentioned, up to 70 years old, and then the incoming one that's been plagued with problems. I think Boeing really needs to get its act together on this. What's your sense of how we're integrating that in your strategic plan?
Chairman, the KC-135 is a fantastic airplane. I was qualified in it once, and it's gotten me around the world and back. It needs to consistently be looked at to improve, to update. Over the years, we've increased the electronics in it. Years back, we improved the propulsion systems. But as we go forward, what's the most important for that is that it gets connected to the joint force. Connectivity is king for that aircraft as it goes forward, and if it's not connected, it's not as survivable as it should be. The KC-46 is a great airplane as well. I've had the fortune to fly it. There are some things that the manufacturer needs to fix, but when that airplane works, it works in fine fashion. It is an airplane that I think that they are going to fix. We need to stick with it, and we need to keep going.
Great. Thank you, General. Senator Reed.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, General Reed. I must say that's quite an impressive name you have. I'm very impressed.
No relation, I assume?
We are related in an emotional way.
Okay.
We're both committed to the country. He's much more committed than I. General Reed, Transcom relies heavily on commercial aircraft in peacetime and also depends on commercial aircraft who participate in the Civil Reserve Air Fleet craft for wartime needs. And craft participants are always concerned about how much cargo capacity Transcom will purchase from them. First, are you taking action to rely more heavily on craft fleet in peacetime?
Senator, we do have access to those aircraft. What's most important to note is that craft, if we were to activate it, would be in case of wartime or a severe crisis. In return of those aircraft being in the craft program, we do use them, and they are able to operate with us. But what's most important is when we have the need for something beyond what we have in the gray hull, they make themselves available. In this way, we can keep them ready and trained to operate with us, and in this way also for the organic craft that we have, we can use them for higher priority sorties.
Now, there's been some discussion about the transportation of detainees and others. Have you considered using craft participants rather than military aircraft to move these people?
Senator, right now, we have authorization to fly these sorties in support of the Department of Homeland Security on a non-reimbursable structure. So as such, I'm not able to use craft.
So DOD is paying for this movement of detainees?
That's correct, Senator.
As I mentioned in our meeting, I heard that the Air Force personnel on these aircraft were not wearing name tags or this unit symbol. Is that accurate, and what can be done about that?
That is accurate, Senator, and if you don't mind, I'd like to discuss that in a separate session.
That's quite all right, sir. I appreciate that. Thank you. We've talked a lot about contested logistics here, and what requirements are you trying to levy on the system to get the services to pay greater attention on operating the logistics systems in contested areas? The requirements you're asking for. Can you briefly describe those?
One of the clearest ways that we're doing that is in our new role for global bulk fuel management and delivery, as we do fuel assessments. We are doing fuel assessments with our fellow combatant commands. We did an initial one with INDOPACOM. We learned some lessons in that one. We next took the assessment to CENTCOM. And as part of that, when we look at where the fuel should be, how it should be set up, what the infrastructure is, and how to meet the needs, we also run a contested logistics scenario on it. And then once we do that, that allows us insight into what's required from the theater as well.
And General, we all recognize the importance of cyber. In fact, it's more important, it seems, every moment. The issue of cyber seems to be particularly challenging when it comes to our civilian aircraft, the craft aircraft. Could you tell us what you're trying to do to enhance their cybersecurity and their ability to communicate with Air Force aircraft?
The cyber domain is very problematic, especially for U.S. Transcom, because as stated before, most of our capability actually resides in the commercial realm. So their networks are not within ours, and they're not as protected as ours. Fortunately, we have a lot of help with law enforcement, also Cyber Command, and also with the U.S. Coast Guard to make sure that we can share information, we can collaborate both for aircraft and for sea lift.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Reed. Senator Scott.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. Senator Reed, thanks for your service. I appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you. And thank you for your service, your family service, everything you do. Go Navy. It's my understanding that the Department of Defense is now moving service members and their families under a new global household goods contract. With peak movie season just around the corner, can you share some of the feedback you've received on implementing the contract? And can you explain the Army's decision to pause moves under this program that do not have enough lead time?
Senator, first and foremost, the reason for the contract is to correct past performance that wasn't as strong as it should be, to get after years of frustration from those of us who move, and also years of frustration from yourselves to help us to try to fix it. In this transition, what we are actually doing is we are having a transformation within a market that still exists. And with this transformation, we actually have a structure, both IT and with a rule structure that actually allows us to see more what's happening in the market, to monitor trends that are positive, monitor trends that are not so much so, and actually have the tools to actually do something about it. We are about 2 years into what is actually a 10-year contract, if you will, base contract of 6 years with 4 one-year options, so we're fairly new at this. There are some performance issues. We are able to see those, and we're actually able to do something about that. With regards to the comment about what the Army has done, the Army has not paused their participation in the contract. What we're doing instead is we, in conjunction with the services, are monitoring the rate of the transfer to the contract, because this is not about the vendor, it is not about the program, it's about those who move. And so as we support those who move, we will match them up for success as we help the transformation mature.
So you've got enough capacity to do the moves, because I guess the summer is your biggest moves, is that right? Just based on school
Summer
years
is the peak season, and usually during that time, both combined, CONUS and OCONUS, it's about 300,000 moves, although we are not putting OCONUS moves out just yet. But with that, we have moves that are still in the contract piece, and there are still moves that are in the current system as well.
And what's happening with the international moves? Is that being impacted at all?
Not at all. That's designed to come at a much later date once we solve this piece here.
Our Ready Reserve Force program plays a critical role in making our ability to deliver equipment and critical supplies. With about 20 of those, we got 20 of the ships that are over 50 years old. Do you have any concerns about the military's ability to keep up?
I do. These ships are really, really old. The reliability of them sometimes are in question because of that. I take my hat off to the crews that are actually on them to keep them warm. But to give an idea of the state of the ships, some of these ships are still run by steam. And the last time that I was on a steam ship, I was a high schooler in Navy Junior ROTC. And so the sailors that we actually put on these ships and the crews that we put on these ships, they deserve something younger.
So do you think if we had a conflict in the Asia Pacific, do you think you could perform?
We could perform. We would have some challenges with that. We would struggle, but we would not perform to the level that I would like to.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Shaheen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to defer to our chairman of. Thank you, General Reed, for being here and for taking time to meet with me before this hearing. As we discussed in that office meeting, New Hampshire's home to the 157th Air Refueling Wing. It's the only KC-46 wing in the country to reach an initial operating capacity. Had to get that in. But you referenced this in your previous statements that Transcom has assessed that the aerial refueling fleet of KC-135s and KC-46s would be subject to considerable stress during wartime. And as you're looking at what this new administration is talking about with respect to funding cuts in the defense budget, is the KC-46 program exempt from those funding cuts?
Senator, in this case, I would have to defer to the Air Force for that. But I have spoken to the service, and I've let them know that I am concerned in terms of the choices that they have to make. We absolutely have to have those aircraft fully supported and funded. And whatever I can do to help the service, I'll certainly do that.
Well, thank you. I agree with that. And as we discussed again in that meeting, the ongoing logistic composite model, which I know the chairman of the subcommittee understands well because it's been an issue in Alaska, but they're doing the study right now at Pease, and it's the result of the Air National Guard's releveling initiative, which under the current projections would reduce the 157th's ability to support Transcom by 22%. Would that have an impact on your needs? Should you need to use that 157th for a refueling mission?
Senator, in this case, I'd have to defer to the service in terms of what they see as the outcomes for that. However, that being said, being familiar with that model, I know that they're going to take a very good look at not only the aircraft itself, which will change how folks work on it, but they will also look at how we use that aircraft in the unit that it's associated with. So the fact that it's in a reserve component is another aspect of actually looking at how folks will work the tasks that should get looked at when they work that study, and I'll wait to see how that study concludes.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I know that you're looking for opportunities to come up to Pease to see firsthand how the 157th is operating and how they're working with the KC-46. So I look forward to welcoming you there sometime in the near future.
And if I may add, yes, your unit was the first one, KC-46, that we employed. They went to CENTCOM, and they did a fantastic job. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. We will definitely make sure that the 157th knows that you said that. I appreciate that. We also discussed your desire to increase Transcom's sea lift capacity. It's something that you've already referenced here, and to increase the 10-ship limit on the by used. Again, I know that you are not the person who's going to decide about the 8% cuts that are being projected at the Department of Defense. But if you had to cut 8% out of your sea lift capacity, what would that mean for your ability to address the mission that you're charged with?
In our pursuit to buy used on the market, that would limit the flexibility that we would have to actually shop the market and find the ships that we need and get them at a suitable price.
So as you're thinking about, you have the capacity to do 10 ships this year, is that correct? Under the NDAA, and hopefully we can get another 10 ships. So what are you hoping to get within the next, this year in terms of that additional sea lift capacity?
This year, the most immediate need would be to make sure that we can have on the order of about $210 million. That would allow us to secure 2 ships on the market, make sure that we could get them into a shipyard, and then reflag them within about 9 to 14 months.
And how concerned are you about having the civilian workforce that it's going to take to operate those ships?
Right now, we have the workforce. My main concern is making sure that I have a young, reliable ship to keep the workforce.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. It's good to know the 157th is up and running with the, I didn't know the KC-46 had a full squadron, so that's great.
We'd love to have you come and visit.
I would love to see it. That's great news. We want them all over the country. We are honored to have our chairman of the full committee, Senator Wicker. Mr. Chairman, the floor is yours.
Yes, we don't need to be cutting the KC-46 program. Now, let's see. I don't know if contested logistics has been asked in this regard, but there's been conversation about coalescing around a single manager for contested logistics. So let's talk about that. Is it time to look for a single manager for contested logistics? And might Transcom be where that role might be assigned? If the balloon goes up, do you think the department currently has a joint contested logistics strategy in place that would be successful?
When faced with a conflict, we figure it out, Senator. And so whether or not we could get the job done or not, we'll get the job done. But to your question, in terms of having a structure and someone who can lead that way prior to a conflict, I am aware of the deep discussions. We've had some of those, and it is time to look at some aspect of that.
Can you give us your best advice here?
Senator, my best advice is to allow me to look at that and structure that, figure out how best Transcom can contribute to that. With the current authorities that we already have, it's aligned in a good way, and I think there's a way forward.
Okay, more later on that. There's been, the Red Hill facility has been closed. It amplifies the logistical challenges in the Indo-Pacific. I think you'll agree. What about levering existing U.S. flag platform supply vessels to enhance military sustainment capabilities in the region? My understanding is that there are at least 13 at-sea resupply ships afloat and ashore near this environment. What do you think about that?
If I understand your question, you're asking how do we work fuel in the theater, whether it's ashore or afloat. That is one of the things that we look at in Transcom. When it comes to the ships to actually do that, we are looking to the employment strategy of the theater commander in terms of how he would want to move the fuel around to look at where that fuel needs to be. When it comes to some of the vessels that we would use for that, I understand that that there is a class of ship that has been mentioned to me that's built here in the States. That shallow draft vessel has some potential, perhaps in the dry cargo arena, but not necessarily for fuels because the tanks that it has is only a single layer.
Okay, so right now, where would you say the plans are? Is it just I think you said you're looking at it. you don't specifically have plans yet to leverage those platforms?
We do not, Chairman, have plans to leverage those particular ships.
Okay, and then one other thing, on unfunded requirements. You said during your confirmation you'd be a fierce advocate to get all the equipment that our folks needed. Do we still have your commitment that you're going to give us a complete list of what you need in terms of these unfunded requirements?
Chairman, I am a fierce advocate to give the force whatever they need using any lever that I have. Right now, for an unfunded requirement, since I have not seen the budget, I'm not there yet.
Oh, okay, yes, but my exhortation to you is that you not hold back on what you need. Tell us, I mean, you're new and you haven't had a chance to assess all this, but do I have your commitment that you will give us as complete a list as possible of those requirements?
Absolutely, Chairman.
All right, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing. So Transcom is responsible for making sure that our military and our allies get everything they need to win on the battlefield, whether it is a new engine for a fighter jet in the Middle East or a missile battery in the Philippines. And that means that Transcom knows better than anyone why it is a very big problem if the military doesn't have the right to repair its own equipment. General Reed, one of Transcom's major workhorses is the C-5M Super Galaxy, a strategic transport aircraft that carries cargo and DoD personnel all around the world. But in 2022, it was able to fly its mission only 52% of the time. That means that nearly half the times that commanders needed it, it wasn't there. Congress saw this, said that is not acceptable, and gave the Air Force $10 billion to fix that problem. General Reed, about how often was the C-5 mission ready the next year after you got the money?
What I can tell you is that in 2023, the mission-capable rate of the C-5 was about 46%.
About 46%. So it went from 52% to 46%. So we could reasonably ask what happened. Well, the Air Force said the supply chain for replacement parts had dried up, and when companies can't or won't meet DoD's needs, one option is for the military to actually make the parts themselves so you can get things up and running. It's often cheaper and faster anyway. But you can't do that if big defense contractors slip restrictions into their contracts that deny the military the technical data that they need to be able to make these repairs. So, General Reed, it's your responsibility to make sure the warfighter gets everything that they need. How important is it to national security for C-5s to be ready to respond to commanders' requests to carry cargo and personnel?
The C-5 is a key aircraft for us. In some of the things that we may be asked to do in the future, it would actually produce about 20% of the lift for us.
So you need this thing?
Yes, we do.
Ready to go. So Transcom's job is getting harder here because our enemies are making it more difficult to send ships and planes to our troops. As Senator Wicker was talking about a minute ago, this is contested logistics. And Transcom models show that the fight to get into the fight means that getting critical materials to our troops is only going to get harder over time. That means the last thing our troops should be doing is waiting around for contractors who charge more for slower repairs. So, General Reed, do you agree that giving the military more flexibility to repair parts in the field will increase our military readiness?
I do, Senator.
Good. Thank you, General Reed. Senator Grassley and I got a provision into last year's NDAA for the military to start a pilot program to reverse engineer parts for sole source programs. It's a good start, but it is a backstop because reverse engineering can actually take years to get done. But if DoD negotiates with contractors for the right to repair from the start, that means our men and women in uniform get their equipment faster and at a lower cost to the taxpayers. That is exactly what my Service Member Right to Repair Act does. It has bipartisan support here in the Senate and on the committee. What's happening right now is fundamentally wrong, and we can put a stop to it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Senator Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. General Reed, good to see you. I want to ask about a couple of topics. My colleagues have covered some of the others that I hope to ask about adequately. One is about the connection, if we want to have adequate sea lift for military purposes, the connection between that and our food aid programs. So, you know, we're all grappling with cuts, pauses. The Supreme Court rendered a ruling today that may reopen the door on humanitarian assistance through USAID. Food aid, about 40% of our humanitarian aid programs are food aid, and it's the delivery of U.S.-grown food to other nations. Just using Africa, the African continent, as an example, the U.S. flagged ships that deliver the aid sort of count on that as what they call one leg of a three-legged stool. They transfer food aid, they transfer DoD cargo, and they transfer FMS or other executive agency cargo. And by transferring all of those and earning revenue for doing it, it maintains a business model where they can keep these ships available for sea lift capacity. If food aid were to disappear and one leg of that three-legged stool were to go away, what would the effect be on the availability of U.S. flagged vessels to be around when we need it for sea lift chores?
U.S. flagged vessels with U.S. crews are critical. We need to make sure that they can go to sea and stay afloat. By us following cargo preference laws, we can actually provide the material for them to actually sail. What that does is it makes them ready. I need them ready. I need them to have a job and know that they have something that they can do. And so when they actually get called to be there for the nation, they're actually there. If for some reason they were not there, then we don't have U.S. citizens supporting us at sea.
And this is really important. My colleagues did a good job of asking, for example, about the need to purchase more, high-quality used vessels so we'd have more sea lift capacity. But with the existing capacity we have, if we were to fundamentally change the sort of business model that keeps those ships ready and on the water by cutting out one part of their revenue, the food aid, for example, then we would reduce even further the capacity that we need so that it might not be available at the time that we need it. Would you agree with that?
I agree.
Thank you for that. My colleagues asked some questions, and you talked in your opening testimony about the DoD contract for the Global Housing Goods contract, 40,000 DoD personnel in Virginia. 120,000 active duty in Virginia, and assuming you move about every 3 years, that's 40,000 moves out and 40,000 moves in. You talked a little bit about how the transition is going, but there was a specific question I wanted to ask. There's something called the continuing to use the Tender of Service Legacy Program during the ongoing GHC ramp-up program, so the kind of the old way of doing it. Now, the rates associated with the legacy program are often 20 to 30% higher than those outlined in the GHC contract. So understandably, some suppliers might be hesitant to transition to the GHC program if they're able to secure more favorable rates by remaining under the legacy system. So this creates an odd situation where two programs are unintentionally positioned against one another, and Transcom can incur significantly higher costs under the legacy program. So how are you managing this legacy to GHC program so that there's not this perverse incentive to remain in the legacy program because the rates are higher?
So the rates are set by what we call a government constructed cost. And we are only we are only able to adjust those rates once a year, which actually happens in May. So once again, we're in a situation where to allow the process to go, we have to wait until May when we have the next opportunity to adjust the rates, which we will do. Those rates will be more in line with the constructed costs, so therefore it will be a less of an incentive to stay outside than to join the GHC.
Great. I'll follow back up after May to see how much we've narrowed that gap and whether that's doing what it needs to do. I will express my support for a position I think my colleagues have already gotten at, that if you need authorization within the NDA to expand the fleet by purchasing more high-quality used vessels, I really would like to make sure you have that authority, and I'll join with my colleagues to see if we can be helpful in that regard. I'll yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kane. General, we're going to do a quick second round of questions, and then we'll move this to a classified setting for a couple additional questions. I wanted to go over this map and handout that you and I discussed in our meeting today. You know, there's a lot of discussion on what's happening on the southern border, not so much about what's happening on the northern border. And as you and I talked about, we've had a really high level of Russian and Chinese incursions both into our ADIZ and into our EEZ on the water. And very disturbingly and unprecedented, number of these are joint Chinese-Russian operations, including strategic Bear bomber and Chinese strategic bomber incursions into our ADIZ this past summer with armed MiG fighters. As you know, the operations to go intercept these incursions take a lot of work. Our young men and women in the military do a fantastic job up in Alaska, but they also need a lot of tanker support for these kind of missions. Similarly with they need fuel support for our Navy when we're doing operations in the Northern Pacific and the Arctic, which we've been doing a lot over the last 3 summers. Additionally, there's a lot of attention paid to the Central and South Pacific logistics lanes for any kind of conflict in Taiwan. But I think it's important to also look at the Northern Pacific logistic lanes as it relates to any kind of conflict like that. During World War II, General Simon Bolivar Buckner called the Aleutian Island chain, which obviously goes out there, a spear pointing right at the heart of Imperial Japan. And by that, he meant it was a very strategic location, not only attacking Japan, but for getting logistics into the fight as our forces throughout the Pacific move closer to Japan. Right now, if you look at one of the ports there, the port of Adak, which is on this map, a closed U.S. Navy base, that is a gateway to the Arctic, but is also on the flank of China. It has 3 piers, nearly two nearly 8,000-foot runways, and one of the largest bulk fuel storage facilities in the world. A lot of people don't know that. So the distance, too, in terms of where Adak sits, is about 2,900 nautical miles from Okinawa, while our good friends in Hawaii are about 4,000 nautical miles from Okinawa, making Adak the closest U.S. port outside of Guam to Okinawa to Taiwan. So President Trump has talked about ensuring Alaska gets more defense investment as we fully rebuild our military, especially as Russia and China are making menacing moves in the Pacific. Admiral Paparo and General Guillot have testified that ADAC would provide them with very significant logistical and basing needs, and that we should reopen it. In terms of logistics, including with the shutting down of Red Hill, what's your thought on this base in terms of for logistics capability, fighter and aviation and Navy shipping support? There's also was a submarine base there. I'd like your view on that, General.
NORAD and NORTHCOM, when it comes to the great state of Alaska, and the forces that they have there do a fantastic job of letting us know when they need our help. And so whenever they ask, we're always there. We've never failed them. As they continue to look at how far forward they can go for the extension, if they're going to be present, so will we. Coming from the other direction, Admiral Paparo, I have given him my word that I will always be there with him wherever he needs us to be. If there's an opportunity to establish more of a footprint in the region, we will be there as well.
And let me ask just real quickly, you were up in Alaska recently. I appreciated the visit in January. Can you give me a sense of kind of lessons learned? I know you were at the Port of Anchorage, which is a really important DoD strategic port. Again, relating to these kind of logistical issues, we think it's important to have additional infrastructure capability in my state. But any main takeaways from the visit you had in January, General? And I really appreciate you coming up to our great state.
Chairman, it was a great visit. Went there intentionally in the winter time to see the conditions there. Unfortunately, it was colder in Illinois than it was in Alaska, and I got in trouble.
Yeah, we've had a little bit of a warm winter, particularly with the Iditarod last week.
But being in Alaska again and having a really good feeling standing there, almost standing on top of the world, looking at what's around us and how close it is incredibly strategic, and the reach that you can have from that location is incredible, and it's a big advantage to the United States. And looking at the Port of Alaska and that port cluster, I was very impressed with what I saw there. The port is well situated where it is. Despite the fact that there was ice on the sea, they were still able to operate. The ability of the Port Authority to adapt to the conditions, the snow and the ice didn't stop them. There was a tremendous amount that we learned there in terms of how to just adapt, period. The other thing was I was very impressed with the conditions in terms of the tides and the tide swings, which I understand can be as high as 12 to 17 feet swing. But the port authorities there and the folks who work the port, they know how to time it, and they know how to marshal things. They know how to line it up. And when it comes time to load and unload, some of the best I've ever seen. So I was incredibly impressed by that. With the U.S. forces that are there, they have a very good handle on their strategic role, not only in terms of what they can project, but the forces that they may host to operate there, or the forces that will actually flow through. And so when we combine all of that together, I'm really impressed with the platform we have in that state.
Great, thank you very much. I just actually had a meeting with our mayor of Anchorage, and we had a lot of discussion on the port, and we'll keep you appraised on the refurbishing of that port. It's really important for our military. It's also really important for the people of Alaska, as that's where the vast majority of our supplies and food and everything and fuel come through the Port of Anchorage. We want to keep that viable, strong, and we're continuing to work on that with you and MIRAD and others. So thank you very much on that, General. Senator
I have
Hirono.
a question. Are you talking about locating a fuel storage facility in Alaska after the closure of Red Hill?
No, there's one that already exists at ADAC. It's huge.
That's in use now?
Not really.
That's
Could
what,
be, yeah.
That's what I'm
That's a
asking you. whether
potential help on Red Hill.
it's already distributed.
Yeah, well, you can continue to think through that.
This was an this was an interesting conversation because the fuel that was stored at Red Hill was massive, mainly to be used by the Air Force. And I think that there are concerns relating to how fuel ought to be distributed more than located in Red Hill. I have a question. In July of 2021, the GAO found that ICE does not know the extent to which its officers are taking enforcement actions against individuals who could be U.S. citizens. And between fiscal year 15 to 20, 674 U.S. citizens were arrested, 121 were detained, and 70 were moved outside the U.S. by mistake. The GAO recommended that ICE should systematically collect and maintain electronic data on its encounters with individuals for whom there is probative evidence of U.S. citizenship, but ICE has yet to do so. This lack of accountability is troubling. General Reed, ICE gives Transcom a copy of every flight manifest prior to transporting migrants, but I understand that you take no steps to verify the identity of the people you are transporting on your aircraft. Is that so?
We do get a list of everyone that we fly. However, ICE maintains control of everyone that's on the aircraft. So from that standpoint, they have the responsibility for the verification.
And so since there have been mistakes made by ICE in terms of them erroneously transporting people who are citizens that shouldn't be transported, so that's an issue. Do you know what the legal basis is for transferring non-citizens arrested inside the U.S. via military aircraft to a location outside the U.S. for deportation, for detention?
I do not know that completely.
Okay. To date, have any U.S. citizens or individuals not charged with any crimes been mistakenly flown to Guantanamo Bay on Transcom assets?
I'm not aware of any.
What steps have you taken to ensure the answer you just gave me is accurate?
For the aircrew, we make sure that they follow established procedures to get a list of the folks and also to make sure that ICE is complying with the things that they tell us that they need to do to maintain control.
We know that Guantanamo Bay is subject to various weather events. And what is the evacuation plan for all of the migrants being sent to Guantanamo Bay in the event of a hurricane or other disaster in Cuba? And this is especially important in light of the fact that the president has said he's planning to send some 30,000 migrants to Guantanamo Bay. So do you know what kind of evacuation plans?
I would have to defer that one to I'd have to defer that one to Southcom.
Okay, another concern. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Well, General, thank you very much for your testimony. What we plan on doing, we have a vote around 4, and we will close the hearing here. And I want to thank you. If there's additional questions for the record from members, we will send those to you in the next couple days, and we ask that you try to respond to those within 2 weeks. And we will reconvene in SVC 217 for a classified scene setter. We'll try and do that in the next 10 to 15 minutes. We'll break now. I'm going to go vote, and then we'll come down and be ready to have a classified update as well in the classified SCIF in the Senate. So with that, thank you again. Very informative hearing. This hearing is now adjourned.